one. So we're recording. All right, we are in green architectural engineering. I'll just state my name because this video could end up floating around on YouTube channel separate. Now, this is Joseph Wunderlich, professor of engineering, architecture, and computer science at Elizabethtown College. And this is a course, Green Architectural Engineering, required for all of the civil engineers, environmental engineers, architectural studies minors, and individualized architecture majors. And we do have a number of mechanical engineers often too. All right, so we'll go into syllabus. And we are down here now in passive solar heating. No, that's not correct. We are now in passive cooling and shading. Waiting for that to open. There we go. So passive typically means minimal technology of any kind. So you want to use the natural characteristics of the earth and the materials and natural forms if you can, and then optimize for sun and heat and cooling. And so we're talking about cooling now, and I've grouped chapter 9 and 10 of our textbook that we're using here, heating, cooling, and lighting. And I've grouped shading and passive cooling together because it seems like they belong together. And so we'll start out just looking at some forms from the past. This is 2,000 years old. Here you're looking at a portico in the Pantheon in Rome, Italy. Originally a temple. It's used for different things, government things too. Over 2,000 years, you imagine the purposes have changed. And then, so this is natural way to shade and to cool, but to shade. So you have, an outreaching piece of architecture off of your building, and it cools the inside if it's big enough, as well as the people standing waiting at the front door. This size portico is going to help cool the inside. And then we have colonnades and loggias. So we see here, this is me in the bottom picture standing in Piazza San Marco in Venezia. And you certainly can feel the cooling effects on a hot day of this kind of architecture. Then to the United States in more recent times, this is a Greek revival. And you see this common in the South. It's very hot and humid, as we're learning in our site design lectures, that this is a place where you want to have evaporative cooling, you want the wind blowing over you, you want shading. So you have tall windows and doors and transom windows above doors and ceiling fans. But what we're talking about here is shading itself. So you have these big porches. You can fit whole living room, dining room sets out on these porches. They're huge. And you see them very common in the South. It also blocks the rain as well as making an outdoor space. This is, we're going to talk about the Ngawa covered porch here. I do believe I don't typically do, well, let's play this first one. This is a rain chain here. I want to show as part of just the Japanese architecture here. Just this is only a couple second thing. So I took this in this little 67-second video clip in Kyoto, Japan. And then let's see some other water things. What's this? Go back into our Zoom. here. No, I'm in the PowerPoint, aren't I? Let me go in there. Okay. Now, I don't want to play all this video. Let me just start it up here. But you can see there's an indoor-outdoor space thing going on. So they photoshopped and made it all black and white over here. But this is not just a covered porch. It's actually part of the building. And this indoor-outdoor living space is something you want to think about for passive cooling and shading. And so sliding wall panels to optimize light and ventilation and views, continuous translucent strips of windows above, and then the hanging chain here. And there's similar designs in a lot of Southeast Asia. And this is 15 minutes. We don't want to hold 15 minutes. Let me just show you a little, we'll pop around in here a little bit. This is NHK Tokyo, Japanology. That's a really cool thing. You get the idea there. So Engawa, also veranda.
That sounds nice.
This is a little odd. This guy's talking to a spirit.
Do we have a Furin wind bell up?
So you get the idea here. He's talking to this spirit. And that's a big thing in Japanese culture. In the Shinto religion, not the Buddhism.
You can see me?
This is a little bizarre, so
I've got a splinter in my
I'll let you
foot
watch
from the flooring.
a little bit.
I have always tried to keep it safe, but Osawa, Shizuoka City, 23 tea leaf farming households live side by side. The Engawa verandas seen here are attracting quite a bit of attention lately. Natsumi Naruse describes herself as an Engawa-loving girl. She travels across the nation looking at Engawa verandas, an act she calls Engawa bathing.
I've come to see the Engawa Cafe here. Hello.
This is what she has come for.
How is it?
Delicious.
Good.
Facing south, this Engawa's ample width of 1.5 meters is owed to the fact that it is also used for farming work. Twice a month, the village works as a whole to open the veranda to the public and serves tea to those who visit. Delicious.
Yeah?
Tea is complemented with dishes made with crops harvested locally. The Engawa serves an important role in the nurturing of such ingredients.
Engawa is great to dry tea leaves on because it has these grooves.
What is under the flooring?
It's chilly.
Boxes of seed potatoes. As it is cool in summer and warm during winter, this space serves as an ideal storage. And the Engawa veranda is the living room under the blue sky.
There aren't a lot of people around, usually. It's great to meet so many people like this.
The Engawa is a great place to interact with others because it's such a casual space.
The Engawa is neither indoors nor outdoors. Let's explore the beauty therein that never ceases to capture the Japanese soul. Situated in a chic Tokyo residential area is a mansion that was built in 1919. Entrepreneur Yoshisaburo Fujita had it built. He was known for his love of constructing buildings. Facing the spacious yard, lush with greenery, is a magnificent engawa. It comprises wooden flooring and tatami mats. Guests would walk on the tatami and the residents on the wooden flooring. Hard hemlock wood with its conspicuous growth rings used for the flooring has a tasteful appeal. The entire ceiling is laid with Japanese cedar. The wavy grain patterns of the wood are deftly positioned to create a magnificent design.
It's so bright in here.
Only a mansion of this scale could offer an engawa like this one.
It leaves me in awe. I can just feel the fusion of nature and the engawa with my 5 senses.
Seasonal expressions come pouring onto the engawa. The first mark of beauty is paradise felt with the 5 senses. The first floor offers an otherworldly sight. Through the glass, the yard looks distorted. Glass in early times didn't have a flat surface.
The rays come through the uneven glass and make an unstable pattern. When I just look at my hands like this, it feels like I'm in water.
It's a dreamy world on an old engawa, brought out by ancient glass. Beside the engawa is a wash basin. The water acts as a mirror to display the sky beyond the trees. Try to rinse your hands and
I can't reach it.
there must be something to it.
I feel like I'm looking at a painting.
And there's more.
The water is reflected on the eaves. It is beautiful. The Engawa is a space brimming with the wisdom of the Japanese people. It's not just flooring, it's almost like an organism.
This is the old district of Tokyo. This is a place for the common folk.
The breeze that passes through here is refreshing. It would be great to sit here after a bath.
This is a space of luxury by the yard. And it is the Ingawa of a Sento bathhouse built in 1938. The Ingawa here is full of features to be enjoyed after one takes a bath.
I feel liberated here.
The Ingawa can soothe the soul and mind. I'm so glad. Huh? What? Oh. Oh. Wow. You're adorable.
It's a little strange. You might as well watch the rest of science.
Kyoto, the ancient capital, brims with culture. This shop has been here for hundreds of years. Its shelves are crammed with rare ancient books. The books at the storefront are placed atop this shelf like Engawa.
We call it the rising shop. It can be raised and lowered manually.
This Engawa is kept folded while the shop is closed. It is lowered only when the shop is open. This folding screen depicts Kyoto at around the 16th century. A rising shop is seen in the picture. This is an architectural style that emerged from Kyoto's long history as a city of commerce. Back when there was no electricity, it was dark inside shops, and it wasn't possible to read or to look at pictures. The Engawa was a place for people to browse books of interest. Now, the Engawa functions as an outdoor shelf. Sasaki spends half an hour each morning to set up 1,000 books for display.
This task gets harder as I age, but there's something about it that draws people inside the shop. I can't do without it.
As always, the Engawa gathered many people on this day.
On a day like today, I feel rewarded for doing all this.
After the shop closes, the Engawa shows a transformation. Wooden shutters are unfolded from above. Sometimes the Ingawa acts as a part of shutters. Today's second market beauty is ideas for transformation. Toyama City by the Tateyama Peaks finds itself deep in snow during winter. This house,
Oops. Okay, we don't want to start a second one here. There's two parts. I forgot about that. But it is worth watching. I mean, I love watching NHK Tokyo Japanology. And there's a Japanology +1 where there's an American guy. He's a little goofy, but he's the end, and he doesn't joke around too much, but he makes it more, Americanized for travelers, I guess, tourists. But it's fun to watch with him too. So I didn't intend to watch the whole thing, but it's only 15 minutes, and I didn't really see a good place to stop it. So again, recall the big picture of what we're doing here. We're trying to find a balance between active and passive that makes sense as engineers and architects. If you can do the natural things that have historically proven themselves in different cultures and across cultures for years, centuries, millenniums, you really should do that first. But then, we're all about high-tech gadgetry too. So, I didn't leave the building industry for a little while. Like I said, I never really left it. But when I was 30, I got my master's and PhD in electrical and computer engineering and IBM research and all that. So, I'm all for the gadgetry, but in measured doses that don't disrupt the natural fabric of the earth and aren't unnecessarily complex either. So on the final exam, I'll ask you something about that. And maybe in your semester projects too, ask you to show how you're balancing those things. Really make use of the site and the sun and the natural elements and the natural materials and the passive heating and cooling and natural sunlight, as well as some sophisticated technology. So I'll be very specific about that soon for your semester project. Oh, now, this is another thing here. I don't think I've played this in this class. This lecture, by the way, is a two-part thing. It's meant to go over 2 lecture periods. So if you're jumping through all the slides and thinking, how's he going to get this done on time? I won't. This is a 2-part thing. And I think I'll probably record both parts. And this is something, so, Devin and Hugh, you were in the summertime course on Frank Lloyd Wright, and then, Colton and Donata, you've heard Frank Lloyd Wright things through a couple of courses, and Colton as a freshman too. So who else was a freshman with me? Oh yes, Ian was, and so I'm sorry if I forget other people. But so I'm doing things Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm writing a book on Frank Lloyd Wright. I try around doing Frank Lloyd Wright stuff. This is a summary. I know we just watched the video, but no, this is not a long thing. This is only about 3 minutes, I believe. What is it? Let's see. But it summarizes some of the organic design things. Oh, this is 10 minutes. Well, I'll do it anyway. My name is Joseph Wunderlitz. I'm a professor of engineering, architecture, and computer science, and this is a summary of organic architecture design principles by Frank Lloyd Wright from many sources. And my experience, I'm born in 1961, I have education, architectural engineering, and urban design, pure architecture projects until age 30, and then a lot of other things since then, including lots of high tech. So this is conform to the site is the first principle: sun, topography, environment. Pinwheel planes, the cruciform, the Prairie School certainly uses that, and around a broad central chimney with long cantilevers, overhangs, and balconies. The folded plane, like origamis, we're looking for inspiration from Japanese things, which he was doing from very early on. 1980 or 1892 or 1893 Chicago World's Fair exhibition with Japanese architecture. Then he visited Japan in 1906 and 1913, and then lived in Japan for 3 full years over a 5-year span, building the Imperial Hotel and doing other things. So simple geometries from his early youth, fourable blocks, his mother using fourable methods, homeschooling him. Always the human scale is the scale that he put things to. Open floor plan, destroying the Victorian box type rooms of his time, flow between rooms inside and outside, bands of windows framing views like the Japanese Engawa. Materials in nature, use materials in the natural state. Form and function are one, harmony, not one following the other secondarily, like yin and yang from Chinese philosophy. So Japanese are Buddhist and have Shintoism and Buddhism, both religions, and the Buddhism is more of philosophy and the Shinto is more of the spirits, rooted in Chinese philosophy. And so they're complementary form and function, like yin and yang. A unified whole inside and out, orchestrating the sun. Very, very first green kind of thought at all, way before anybody invented that kind of thinking. Really, John Muir was existing at that same time. I actually went to the University of Wisconsin around the same time as Frank Lloyd Wright, but he wasn't an architect. Bring nature out of materials, but also innovate. So textile blocks, modular Ken design system, which you can see is inspiring him at times. The structure of that, the modularity of that. A structural art. It was referring in some of his writings to the Japanese woodblock prints that he collected throughout his life, quite a few, and inspired him. He admitted to that inspiring him. Other things he would not admit to. Louis Sullivan and the fourable blocks he would admit to inspiring him, but parallels between his architecture and Japanese architecture, he was just saying it's because they're of like mind, but his is original. Soft, warm, optimistic color tones of earth, assimilating fixtures into the structure that goes for the light fixtures as well as built-in furniture, many plants and planters. Architecture is music, both literally in his buildings, put places always for pianos, most places, or actually put them in certain buildings, organs and pianos, and metaphorically also in the structure of the structural art of the music and the rhythm and the organization, like a symphony. And his father was a musician and a preacher. Also, he was a lawyer too, and he was highly educated from Colgate University, bachelor's and master's degree, when nobody really had that kind of education at the time. Also, architect mentor Louis Sullivan, which you can see some of the organic type of sensibilities of Frank Lloyd Wright, coming from Louis Sullivan, or beginning with Louis Sullivan. So Louis Sullivan was certainly an influence. And lots of the arts and crafts movement, first in England and then the United States, was going on at that time. And you'll see that in Frank Lloyd Wright's work. And also he lived in Italy for a year. You can see some of that, but mostly Japan. So from early on, seeing in the World's Fair and then visiting twice and then living there in 3 years and collecting Japanese prints. And it's in his writings too. He just was very prideful and didn't want to say that he's making Japanese architecture, and he wasn't. He was very original, but there's certainly a lot of things in common. So you can see some pictures here. I took a picture of this tree and this path in Narita, and then you see some key words from a colleague, Mahawa Bhattacharya. She's the head of our Japanese program, and there's keywords for my students over the past 15 years or so, maybe longer, 20. Been working 21 years at Elizabethtown College. And then you see this gate, the Shinto gate on the far right there. That's a tractor trailer down at the bottom to give you an idea of the scale. This is in Kyoto, and my son on the right. And this gate symbolizes the entrance from the real world to the spirit world in the Shinto religion. And then one note on the bottom left here, the compression and release. It's not part of organic design, organic architecture, but it's commonly used by Frank Lloyd Wright as a psychological method to cramp or hide people, make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. You can't find the entry, or you're low ceilings, not well lit. But then you really feel the impact, the drama of the destination architecture is magnified. Frank Lloyd Wright's youth was influenced, of course, by his father and mother. His mother homeschooled him using the Froebel methods. Froebel invented kindergarten in Germany before Frank Lloyd Wright was born. Froebel was also influenced by Taoism and Buddhism. Japanese Shinto is rooted in Chinese Taoism mixed with indigenous Japanese religion when it came over from China to Japan. Shinto gods see in everything nature, and Frank Lloyd Wright would later love much about Japan. His father was a preacher, lawyer, school superintendent, teacher, musician, mostly a musician, although he made a living as a preacher, and not just in the Unitarian Church, but other churches too. And but mostly as a musician, and he published a book in music, and Frank Lloyd Wright was very much influenced by that throughout his life. Frank Lloyd Wright's mother was in this Unitarian church also, and the Unitarians believed love of nature and God and everything. And so there's similar parallels there. And Frank Lloyd Wright grew up in Wisconsin, mostly also lived in New England some. And in parallel here, on this slide, I show Maria Montessori, and Montessori schools were influenced by Froebel in parallel to Frank Lloyd Wright's development in the same time period. So future designers I show as being influenced by both Frank Lloyd Wright and perhaps Montessori methods. These are the majority of the references that I've used for these this lecture series, and they're worth taking a look at each of them individually when you have time. I've organized this lecture series into 7 parts based on. I'm going to stop that there because I have a little more detail on that. Let's see this. So we're looking at this part of the lecture series we don't have to look at right now. Let's go back to where we were in here. And so now I'm showing all that, and I'm not going to show this whole next video. This is a hour and 20-minute thing that I think I've showed a little bit of, and some of you have seen pieces of. This is a video log of Frank Lloyd Wright's works in and around Chicago. So my son and I spent a week and a half doing that. You can see all of them here. And then we also spent a week, in Arizona last Christmas, getting 10 more for what we're putting together. He's helping me write the book, actually. He just started thinking about it now, or well, he's been doing work all along for years with me, but he may write some of that book very soon. And then don't click down on all this right now, but you can come back and see the whole lecture series. This is a whole separate thing. But you could see his whole life of Frank Lloyd Wright. Now I'm showing you this because he really is the original master of passive kind of things to do. Way before Lied, was born 100 years before Lied was even thought of, and then mastered Lied, his own organic architecture 70 years before Lied was conceived. So if you can be inspired by some of his principles, now you really got to learn his whole life, a long life of 91 years with 70 years productive, over 1,000 designs, 500 built, 4 of them now on the UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's not something you're just going to look at, in a couple of days, but you can find certainly things that will inspire you out of his works, and I have. And then, so it's not hopefully not too much of a tangent. It's very much applicable because the greatest American architect of all time, arguably the greatest architect of all time, and really the father of sustainable kinds of architecture, sustainability, for anybody who was really thinking about that. And then there were other people that at that same time, late 1800s, early 1900s, that were influenced by Japanese things. Not a lot, but these Green and Green. This is in Pasadena, California. This is a very popular building there, and you could see the kind of Ingawa inspiration here, and even the Shinto shrine kind of built into the architecture as well. So the lines of it. I mean, this is turn of the century stuff built when most people were building Victorian and colonial homes. So this is clearly something different for that time. Now, the arts and crafts movement was going on, and yes, you can see a little bit of that in there, and that's, origins in England. But this is clearly, to me and most people, you can see the Asian, Japanese influence. Now, this is something inspired by the green and green architecture a little bit further south of Pasadena, California. Pasadena is Los Angeles region. A lot of that's not my favorite. It's kind of gone downhill a little bit, but there's still very beautiful things around there. I just got to be careful where you go. But if you go down south in Orange County, it gets a lot nicer, and that's where I end up a month every year. And my wife's family and my daughter's actually out there in college right now. She's 18, just moved out there by herself. Well, my wife moved her out. And then my wife and I were married in this church. This isn't inspired by green and green. You can see the Japanese influence. This is a portico at the Torrey Pines Golf Course. Whoops. And you can see this back porch and everything here being inspired by the green and green designs in Pasadena, which is inspired by Japanese things. This is where we had our wedding reception. There's me and my wife in 1988. And my best friend giving a toast. He's now a judge and we were engineers together actually at Penn State, and he graduated, and then I transferred to Texas the same year he graduated, and then he was a petroleum engineer. Then when he got his MBA, did that kind of stuff. Then he got his law degree. Then he was a district attorney, then a prosecuting attorney. Then he started his own law firm, and now he's a judge sometimes in California Bay Area. Yeah, I still talk to him every week or so. He's a good buddy. But anyway, that's us. There's my father-in-law walking my wife bride down the aisle. Unfortunately, he's just had quadruple bypass surgery and then just got diagnosed with colon cancer. He's getting surgery on Tuesday, on election day. It looks like only stage 2, so curable. But he's 83, so you're thinking about him. All right, so back to the nitty gritty of details of the engineering. So this is some important passive solar design concepts for controlling sunlight. So we have 3 things here, a couple important things for controlling the way the waves are coming in. So you see first the orientation of your windows here. And so you see the daily solar radiation on the y-axis here in BTUs per square foot. And then you see how it changes per season. And so, the horizontal surface would be a roof. And then you have the elevations of your building, east and west and south. You're like, what's going on here? What? So, you got to think about this. When the sun is high in the sky, oh, and by the way, at the top here, it's latitude 42 degrees north latitude, which is approximately where we are on the globe. So, northern hemisphere, upper middle part. And so in the summertime, the sun is very high in the sky. And so your southern exposure is not getting hit because the sun's essentially over the building, right? And when it's in the, when it's in the winter time, it's coming in the southern exposure. And that's what you want. And you want to design your overhang such, or you want to, design your building such that this happens where we are, because we want the sun to come in the winter and we want to keep it out when it's burning hot. So this is something to consider. These graphs, of course, vary by latitude, of course, and you want to think about that. And then the east or west, what's going on here? Well, the sun is rising or heating, coming in low as it's rising or setting. And so your east and west, and actually the west. Now this is solar radiation, but if you were going to look at the actual the heat up of the house, the loading of the house with the sun fenestration, not just the incident sun, flux of photons per square inch coming in, but also the thermal heating of the building, the thermal increase through the day. You're going to see that during the day that the west side is much worse than the east because there's a thermal lag. The building heats up during the day, and then when the sun's setting into the windows, you can overheat your house with too many western windows. So, and this is the first step in understanding the orientation of your windows and your house in general on your site. And you want to, so this is one of the things I want to ask you to consider when you're designing your building. for your final project is sun orientation and placement of your windows, and discuss why you've picked what you've put where in an engineering sense. So this is passive solar here. And then you can talk about the active and where you put your photovoltaics or whatever you're doing. But this is, understanding this. So I just kind of reiterating everything I just said down here. And then also some things about skylight. I don't want to read all this here, but you don't want to face them directly south or west, really, because of that thermal lag that I mentioned. And the east is good. These are skylights, because then you're letting the morning sun in, and it can wake you up in the morning if you like that kind of a nice thing. And then also facing north, I mentioned this before about for optimal lighting and not glare for art studios and architectural studios, because you really don't want the sun changing what it does. If you're on the north, you see how the north is more even here. You can't avoid this, up down kind of thing going on. And this is by month too. If you look at during the day, you have similar things to think about. And the north's not really getting any direct light when you're looking at daily solar paths that we looked at during that lecture. However, if you're going to do that, you need to mitigate the cold northern wind blowing on that side of the building. So, and then you want to balance out. We want operable windows now, right? For COVID and other diseases that have happened in the past. We've talked about the critical things, the Spanish flu certainly, but also leukemia and other things, airborne aerosols. We know for sure COVID is like that now. And we kind of always knew, but now everybody knows. And so, if you're going to have operable windows and you want your architectural studio to have it like every place else in your building, well, then you're going to have some heating and cooling problems potentially. It help with the cooling, but the heating if you want your windows open on the north side of your building in the winter. All right. That's the first thing is window orientation. Also diffused light coming in. So we have, the orientation of your windows, where you put them on the building and how you orient your whole building, but where you put your windows, how much, how big, what angle, if it's on a roof. And then what other light? You have diffuse light. So where we are now in this mid-Atlantic, northeastern United States, we get a marine layer. You can see it when you fly overseas and you go, like if you go out of Dulles and out of Washington, or maybe not out of New York City as much, but you go way up high, and then you take a northern route typically to Europe, or you take a polar route to Asia. But you get way up high, and you can look down and you can see the marine layer coming and sitting over the whole Northeast, covering Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. You can almost always see this. It looks like a fog of sorts. But we live in it even on sunny days, and it diffuses the light. And what the important implication there is that you can get light then, kind of in the building, natural daylighting, or even a little bit of heating with direct fenestration thermal gains by the diffraction and the deflection, diffraction, scattering, right, of the sun through the particles. It's by the way why the sunset is reddish looking. It's because of the wavelengths of lights and the probability of hitting and scattering certain particles, or the density of particles and the wavelengths that are most likely to scatter. But anyway, this is diffuse light that can get into the buildings in these areas, also in humid, polluted areas too. And so you want to consider that. Now, if you're in a really dry spot, like in Colorado on top of the Rockies or in Arizona, you'll notice that you're not getting any diffuse light into the building. That can be a good thing where it's heating up too much, or a bad thing in Colorado if you're on top of a mountain. You might want some diffuse light getting in for the heating, because you want the heat if you're cold in Colorado. But in Arizona, you want to keep it out. So, it's something to think about. How much the light is being diffused based on where you are in the world, not just latitude, but the microclimate you're in. Like I just mentioned, we're kind of sitting in a marine layer that stays on us in the East Coast. Number 3 is controlling reflective light. And so you want to look at, how you're controlling that or mitigating that. Do you want to channel it in? So I have here, given its maximum in non-humid and non-polluted places. And so you really can get these, you don't have it diffusing in, but you have much more intensity. You even feel this in Arizona I mean, certainly in the summer you're going to feel it, but I felt it in the winter and in some of those desert places in California and Arizona and New Mexico, even parts of Texas, although it depends where you are in Texas. Houston's humid, Dallas is not, El Paso is not, but Austin's in the middle, and I live in Austin. But anyway, and sometimes you get these direct rays. So the direct rays, it almost burns your eyes even in the intensity of the light, even in the winter time in the middle of the day. And so that can bounce and get into the building. Now you may want that, or you may want not to heat you up. So you want to think about that. Do you want it in or not? And it's going to be more in these dry places. And then you can magnify, it gets magnified. There's places where you'll see people even putting white rocks or white concrete out front here just to channel the light in, to get the light in. You also want to think about the impact of neighbor buildings. And there are places in the world and in the country where the effects of solar adjacencies are considered. Even in early Roman times, there were sun use laws, or sun access laws. You couldn't block people's natural sunlight, 2,000 years ago in Western civilization. And you've heard already that in ancient Japanese and Chinese before that, for couple thousand years, more than that, probably about 5,000 years. And then the Egyptians too, about 3,500 years. But anyway, so magnifying by the reflective, magnified in high density areas, this can be a problem building high rises. And it's controlled best with outdoor vertical shading kind of things, trees and shrubs. However, there's sort of a trade-off here. So direct sunlight, however, is controlled best with horizontal, like louvers, although some vertical things outside are good too. So, it's not just vertical good, horizontal bad, it's a mix. So shading methods now. And there's a number of them here. So all of these now are architecture and engineering, although we're talking about passive now, passive shading and cooling. So you're going to lean more towards the architectural sides of things when you get away from the active and go passive, as you might imagine. The ultimate of the active is the ultimate in engineering, right? But a balance, of course, always go for balance. So and we'll look for that in your final exam and in your paper too, some kind of balance. You push the envelope with technology, yes, please. But don't forget the passive things. Do that first. So number one, overhangs, and the depth is a function of the sun angle, the seasons, the latitude, the building elevation. So you can see the summer sun is high in the sky, winter sun is low, right, typically. And so you want to design this. You want to design this and very specifically understand this solar path and how that varies, through the day. I mean, we're looking at we're looking at a section here. So, this sun is coming at us sometimes and then going away from us other times because it's part of a trajectory, right? The solar path. And then throughout the year, it varies in the elevation of the sky. This, the curve follows. So you want to, so you wanted south, best, also east. So yeah, your long overhangs are best in the south, also some in the east. It's a little more difficult in the west because your depth is going to be a little more significant because of that thermal lag I mentioned with the building heating up. Now this Bryce Solil, I'm not sure the exact pronunciation of that, but I've seen this. There is a Armstrong Platinum building down in Lancaster. I've had guest speakers from there. I've gone there. I judged the regional lead awards for the United States Green Building Council. Actually, they recognized me at one banquet there. But they have platinum now. It's not design platinum. Actually, they have their O&M platinum down there. But I think they got silver on the design. But they have these louvers that will change that are set up. That you can have them active too, but you set them up in an optimal way, and then you don't have to move them. Also, arbors. You see these actually helped rebuild one of these in California not too long ago. Oops, don't go that just yet. We'll talk about these. Oh no, we're still on the overhangs here. These are the upper. This is the Bryce Solil, or however you pronounce that. but it's going to be similar to arbors that we're going to see coming up. Now, I'm not going to go through all this right now. I want you to come back to this. But if I do ask you to do this in your semester project, I want you to go in here and look at this here and in your book. Go YouTube and Google it if you need to, but I want you to have some precise dimensions on your overhang. So I'm leaning towards that. Almost all of the 22 of you are engineers, and even if you're not, architects too, you need to be able to do some calculations. So, there's the whole thing with the trigonometry and everything else. And so I've made this a homework thing in the past. I put it as a separate problem on a test in the final. I'll give you some idea if we're going to do that this year. It's all going to be on open book and online. So I'm not sure how I would do this, but I'll let you know later. But so this, there's plenty of engineering in here. Well, it's not calculus, but I've made it nice. Give you a curve shape or something maybe. Something related are arbors. They're like slatted overhangs, but often deeper to shade outdoor living space. So there was a mild earthquake that came Southern California about 10 years ago. And my father-in-law's house, they had two of these together, and they were not connected, but they were kind of moving around. And so I built a structural connection between the two of them and braced everything, fixed everything with him. It was sort of a fun project we just did together. I didn't charge him anything. He's been generous enough, including paying for that beautiful wedding and everything else 32 years ago. Awnings, you see these Europe quite a bit, in Italy too. Donato, I'm sure you see these around. This is a great thing to do. You don't see it a lot anymore, but this operable way of getting some nice shading and cooling, because cooling costs can be very expensive, especially getting these hot states. And now more and more we're going to want more air exchanges. I don't want to get back on the whole COVID thing, but you'll see very soon. Now everybody sees the aerosol form. Yes, of course, that's a problem. But when is it a problem, and how intense? What about in the cold when everybody stuffs in the building? Oh, yeah. What about in the heat when there's stuff in the air conditioning? Yeah, that too. Direct correlation. So why not find nice passive ways? Put a nice canopy. You don't have the direct sunlight coming in. You sit outside, have people eat outside, put the restaurants outside, canopies outside. I'm sure you're going to see more and more of this now. But it's always been a great thing to do. And it's relatively cheap, really, compared to building a structure. This is an operable one. And you can do them over individual windows too. You have window shades now. And of course, you know that, how those work. There's different ways of doing that, and control the natural shading and light coming in, natural cooling. This is something common in Europe, and I'm sure Donato is from Italy, you've seen this too, but you'll see these armored windows. No, it's for security in a lot of places too, but it lends itself to being feasible to do because of the thickness of the walls. You don't typically build wood, 2x4 wood stud stick frame. You don't at all in European countries. I remember I went and met it was actually a German family in Italy, and they were I was showing them pictures of the house I built here, and they're like, "Oh, how can you build out of sticks like that? They're going to burn down or blow away." They have a good point. In Europe, the walls are usually thicker, and then that'll lend itself to putting something like this in the wall. But it's certainly thermal characteristics. Doesn't have to be just armor. You could bring down a big thermal barrier. The R value we'll see in the later thermal envelope lecture is very low. If you do heat signatures, heat traces of the building imaging, your thermal imaging, you could see that the windows, even the very best windows, are the biggest source of heat loss and heat gain during the hot months, trying to cool things off. It's more costly, of course, to do something like this, but better thermodynamics, security, and better noise reduction. So I stayed in Milan the first time I went to Italy, and it was real busy where I was. It was a beautiful place, but I remember rolling down these things, and it reduced the noise tremendously. And they weren't operable windows, or maybe they were, but even when they were closed, they were really good windows. It was high quality windows in a lot of Europe. But this shade made a difference. So you need thicker walls. However, in the US, we're going to see when we get to the R value in the thermal envelope section, content in chapter 15 and 16 later on, that now the building codes in the United States are calling for 2x6s on exterior walls in a lot of places, including around Pennsylvania, the Northeast region. So you can fit more insulation. Now, the whole reason so you can fit more insulation on the wall, so you can get the now increased R value thermal resistivity requirements by code. Varies by region, of course. Well, number 5 is louvers and blinds. So we have horizontal ones here, blinds, mini blinds, Venetian blinds. You can put reflective coatings on them. Vertical ones, I've had these in places. They block the views. They're kind of ugly. They break easy. That's my own biased opinion, I guess. But let's look for yourself of these two views and tell me which one's obstructing the view. Up on top here, you're getting that, the views and the sunlight, the sky. You know, the bottom, that's not, and that's not how your eyes work either. I teach lectures on that, on the actually the physiology as well as the machine vision versus biological vision, and how you're, I mean, your eyes want to jet back and forth, side to side, not up and down. And so we triangulate and we actually interpolate. We have blind spots and we only have intense resolution and a 2% field of view in the very middle of our eyes, and our eyes go back and forth. And then our neural network interpolates in between the two. And so you can't really do that with these horizontal blinds. On vertical blinds, you can do that. And you can almost, like, you know, with just one big thing in the way, interpolate and not have your view obstructed. If you have a lot of slats, your neural network's not working so good. And then glazing treatments now too. So you see reflective glass, popular in the United States Southwest. I've done this, actually specified and bought it myself in the California project. The Texas one, it was before I got there. But I did build half of those buildings and specify a lot of things on the inside, architecture and engineering. But you see this whole solar heat gain coefficients and clear glass versus reflective versus blinds and trees and glass block. But the reflective is what I'm showing here in the bottom two pictures. And so, yeah, I bought, this was a brand new thing in 1986 on the bottom slide. You had that blue Ford reflective blue glass. And so the building actually was nominated for an Orchid Award. And that was my choice to do that, and my thoughts. And the shapes of that building too. Luckily, I had some authority over that because I was the owner's representative, and he just put all the money up, and I got to hire everybody. Kind of a weird thing to do. He was only 35. I was 24, 25. You're not going to see that kind of thing much in the East. More old school, or, you know, older people running things. Number 7 is trellises. So we finished up here real quick. Trellises, vertical, just this part of this lecture, vertical. And this is architectural as well as an engineering thing to do, right? It's beautiful, and you put vines on it, and you grow fruit on it, flowers, beautiful bougainvillea, big red flowers you can see in the, definitely in California, a little bit in Texas and Florida too. Plants, of course. So, you know, where you want to have high canopy trees, deciduous trees that have their leaves won't block the sun in the summertime, you know, where we live in Pennsylvania, and then let it, the leaves fall off and let the sun through in the wintertime. And then you see some pictures here in Genoa, Italy, Genova, and Rovereta. That's up in the north eastern region, Trentino Alta region, up near the Brenner Pass, and Switzerland and Austria, where I taught. I was a guest professor, not this trip, but then trip after this, I was a visiting professor for almost a month. But anyway, so the, you know, shading things, natural shading we're talking about here. Trees, use the natural elements. White roofs, it's a shame people don't do white roofs. Look at the difference in reflectance of the white roof. But everybody does black because that's just what we're accustomed to. But you switch to white, and imagine the difference in thermal gain, how much your building's heat. Now, you may want to, if you're in North Pole or Canada, you may want to get that heat. And there's a trade-off kind of, I mean, if you have a white roof in the east, but you're going to have a white roof when it snows, but you know, you want a white roof in the summertime. And then standing seam, actually in Texas, I wrote a giant working drawing set of specifications where they manufactured a roof. It was part of an estimating business I had, but they commissioned me to make the working drawings for it and cut them. And so I know a little bit about that. And they're really nice in Texas for reflecting the heat off. And they're kind of beautiful in the Texas architecture too. That was before I worked for developers. So now I think this is where we want to stop here, but also finish here. So I'll start the next time. But the balance of thermal and natural daylight. So we're going to have whole chapters on lighting coming up, and we've already talked a lot about thermal things. And so you want to balance the control of sunlight with the daylighting. And sometimes they're at odds with each other. Sometimes you want that sunlight in to light things up, but you're heating up the people too much, right? And so you need to balance that. And so it's not a sun good, sun bad kind of thing. It depends. And even in a certain specific time of year, you have a trade-off of light and thermodynamics to consider. So I'll be looking for that kind of answers and tests and final project analysis. All right, so I think that's plenty for today. Just briefly, so Monday we'll finish up this lecture. I think I'll record the second part too. So we have it in 2 pieces, and I think 3 people actually wanted me to record it today. 1 person asked, but probably 3 people need it. And then very shortly I will define your semester project. All right, let me stop recording here. All right, stop. Find the recording thing. Stop recording. Stop share. All right, there it is.